So now we reach the second pillar of the unholy trinity of 90s Disney animated shows. And this is one that I don't have that much to talk about, Marsupilami, which is a 1993 Disney animated show based on a comic of the same name. So back during my review of Raw Tunage, I briefly mentioned Marsupilami and what my thoughts were on it. I had no feelings towards this one in any way whatsoever, and watching the series proper and skipping the shorts that initially showed up in Raw Tunage, I consider myself stumped on what I could say about this one. I mean, I could reuse the exact same talking points that I talked about in regards to what I said towards Raw Tunage, but that would be incredibly lazy of me to do, just as lazy as what this show does in of itself, so I'll muster up the summarization that I could. The premise of this show is what you'd get if you basically made Looney Tunes and set it in the jungle. That is literally it. Kind of like how Schnookums and Meat was basically trying to follow the crowd of what many other people were trying to do at the time with Ren and Stimpy, Marsupilami is basically doing this exact same thing but with Looney Tunes. And this does make sense the more you think about it, because during the 90s, Looney Tunes was at the height of its popularity. You could literally go nowhere without seeing Looney Tunes in some form. One of the Looney Tunes spin-offs, in fact, Animaniacs, went on to become one of the most beloved cartoons of all time. So it was only a matter of time before Disney wanted a slice of that pie, and Marsupilami is definitely the result of that. And Marsupilami is what you get if you tried to take Looney Tunes and give it no flavor in any way whatsoever. There is one thing that does make this show stand out from Looney Tunes, I guess. That being that the titular character Marsupilami has this extremely long tail that he uses to spring himself into the air, which is what I'm guessing that Wow Wow Wubsy based its main character on. But otherwise, he just comes across as a more bland and one-note version of Bugs Bunny. And Maurice, Marsupilami's best friend, has the word nothing written all over him. You can't even say that he's the show's comic relief, though the show frequently has moments where he's dumb and gullible at the exact same time to either realize that he's working for the Jim Cummings poacher, or that he'd catch on to what he'd do, but get distracted by a banana. But the show doesn't really make any jokes about it. It's just kind of there. But other than that, I got nothing. To be honest, my comparison between Raw Tunage and Grim and Evil was right on point during my review on that show, because Marsupilami is to Bonkers like what Evil Con Carne was to The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, where one of the two shows went on to become a massive hit for the company, while the other fell into obscurity. But here, I use the word success very loosely, because the only reason as to why Bonkers ever got noticed at all is because the show was initially supposed to be its own thing before it got morphed into a clone of Who Framed Roger Rabbit that barely even wanted to be Roger Rabbit, but instead a generic cop show. In fact, if I'm being honest, Marsupilami very much comes across as if it was wanting to be the middle segment of a full Bonkers show, but was stuck as a show that was left to fend for itself instead, because when Bonkers did get a full show, the episodes were 22 minutes. But this show's early shorts being on Raw Tunage was more detrimental rather than helpful, because I kid you not, there were only 13 new shorts that were produced for this show. The other 13 shorts that appear as the final segments of an episode of this show are all recycled from Raw Tunage, while the middle shorts are either a Schnookums and Meat short, yes, Schnookums and Meat initially premiered during Marsupilami, or a Sebastian the Crab spin-off series of shorts, presumably to get Marsupilami some attention, because I presume that even Disney knew that Marsupilami was not popular enough to have it stand on its own. But Marsupilami honestly shares the same purpose that US Acres did for Garfield and Friends, and I Am Weasel did for Cow and Chicken. It works more as a side dish to the main show rather than the main dish itself. I wish I had more to say about Marsupilami, but this show barely gives me all that much to talk about. I had more to say about Bonkers, as well as Totally Tasteless Video from Raw Tunage, rather than Marsupilami in of itself, because those two were interesting in terms of the issues that I had with them. Even the other two segments that appear in this show alone give me more to discuss than what is supposed to be the main course of the show. And while we're on the subject of that series real quick, I'm not going to discuss the Schnookums and Meat shorts, because watching through all 5 of the ones that appear in this show, I can already tell that I'm gonna have a lot to say about it when I get to the Sean's Network Reviews episode on that show, so let's put our focus on Sebastian the Crab, not the character himself, but the shorts in this show. To be honest, these shorts honestly feel like they were originally going to be in Raw Tunage, but when that show was cancelled, it got switched to this show at the last second. Or they were trying to pitch a Sebastian spinoff to Disney and it got rejected, but decided to let those shorts be in this show in particular. And if the latter was the case, I'm gonna say that thank goodness for that, because these shorts are bad. So remember what I said about The Adventures of Bernie during my double review on Zig and Sharko and The Adventures of Bernie? Basically, copy and paste my exact same thoughts on The Adventures of Bernie onto my thoughts on these shorts. I am not kidding when I say that all of these shorts, with the exception of the Scout Troop camping short, are basically just nothing but watching Sebastian suffering for little to no reason, in ways that are not even funny at all, nor did he even do anything to really deserve his suffering. The worst one being the short where Sebastian basically deals with a female Pepe Le Pew, who basically violates his boundaries throughout the short. Also, as a spin-off to The Little Mermaid, there's not much that you could really do with Sebastian on his own. His purpose in The Little Mermaid was to make sure that Ariel was safe. That's pretty much it. Now, Timon and Pumbaa, which came out 2 years after this show, was able to work with this because Timon and Pumbaa had a dynamic that could work in a full show, same with the penguins of Madagascar. The only thing that they really do with Sebastian in these shorts is basically having his rivalry with Chef Louie return, but these shorts run this joke into the ground real fast. But other than that, despite the fact that Marsupilami is in the unholy trinity of 90s Disney animated shows, this is definitely the best out of all of them, though that was a given because Bonkers had way more episodes, and it was worse than just being forgettable, and Schnookums and Meat is one that I'll be discussing sometime soon. Marsupilami is just there. I wouldn't even say that this show is that bad in the grand scheme of things. I mean, with the Marsupilami shorts being here alone, this show would have gotten a 5 out of 10, but with Sebastian the Crab and Schnookums and Meat being here, it dropped down slightly to a 4 out of 10. But don't think that it's over yet, because this is only the appetizer to what is the main course.
Next. Everything